It would be my pleasure to inverse to our first panel this morning, which will focus on regional outlook for the Arab world. The moderator for this panel is Mr. Abdelrahman Elbardisi. Mr. Elbardisi is the White House correspondent for Araby TV, which, after Al Jazeera, is the second leading Arabic satellite TV news channel. It also originates in Doha, Qatar. Mr. Elbardisi is known for his excellent, detailed, accurate political reporting and exclusive interviews. I'd also like to point out that for the panel, I'm hoping that it will generate questions in your brains this morning, and there will be ushers around that have little note cards that are available for you. If you have questions, please jot them down and we'll get them answered for you during the Q&A session. One of the ushers towards the end will be gathering the note cards with your questions. So with that, please join me on the stage, Mr. Elbardisi. Here we go. The floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks so much. Appreciate it. Thank you. Yes, hello everyone. I'm really thrilled and honored to be here at the National Council, and we will discuss today a very important topic at very important time, as you know, as the Middle East is changing, and we will discuss the relationship between the US and the Arab countries and what's happening right now in the Middle East, especially in Gaza, Syria, Lebanon, Iran, and also Yemen, and the Gulf countries, and how they reshape their economy to be leading the entire world, and how the new administration, the Trump administration, is trying to invest more. And the benefits, as whenever we talk to the US officials, they always say the benefits for the Gulf countries is actually beyond anyone would imagine. This kind of relationship in the economy and politics, I will be actually, I'm proud to discuss it with our four experts, Ambassador Amal Mudallali. If you could please come here, Ambassador. Thank you. If you could join us. Thank you. Ambassador Al-Mudallali, she's a former ambassador for the Lebanon to the United Nations and first woman to hold that position, a globally recognized expert in diplomacy, and she served as a vice president of the United Nations General Assembly. And also she served as vice president of the UNICEF Executive Board. And as we know, she led major initiatives on food security, climate peace solutions, and more. Thank you so much, and welcome with me, Ambassador Amal Mudallali, please. Thank you. And also, I will be, please welcome with me, Dr. April Elay. Could you please come to the stage, Dr. April? Thank you. Dr. April, she's a senior fellow at the Washington Institute, where research focuses on Yemen and the Gulf countries. She's an expert with over 15 years of experience in conflict analysis and mediation. She most recently served as a senior expert for Gulf states and Yemen at the U.S. Institute of Peace. Previously, she spent 4 years at the UN as a senior political advisor at the United Nations Special Envoy to Yemen. Thank you so much, and welcome with me, Dr. April. Thanks. And we welcome also Dr. Fadi Hilani. He's a senior academic. Could you please come here, Dr. Fadi? Thank you. Dr. Fadi Hilani, he's a senior academic and researcher fellow in the residence at the National Council on U.S.-Arab Relations, specializing in U.S. politics, Middle East policy, and international relations. He was educated in the U.S. and U.K., and he has taught in some universities in Syria, Jordan, and here in the United States. His research focuses on U.S. diplomacy in the Middle East, including Syria's future and the regional power dynamics. Welcome with me, Dr. Fadi Hilani. Thank you. And with us right now, if you could please come, Dr. Mona Yacoubian. Thank you. Dr. Mona Yacoubian is the director and senior advisor of the Middle East program at the Center of Strategic and International Studies. She has more than 30 years of experience working on the Middle East and North Africa, MENA region, with a focus on conflict analysis and stabilization challenges and conflict prevention. Thanks so much, and welcome with me, Dr. Mona Yacoubian. Thank you. Great. Okay, so welcome to the National Council on the U.S.-Arab Relations. We meet today, as we said, in a very critical time, changing the Middle East and the ongoing wars in Gaza. Hopefully it will be solved after as you know, the voting yesterday at the Security Council that took place. And also we have the conflict in Yemen and the instability until now in Syria. And also there is a deep crisis in Lebanon, as you all know. And over the next hour, we will try with our 4 experts to help us understanding these shifting dynamics and what they mean for the region's future. So I will like to start actually with very important topic with Ambassador Amal Mudallali about the 12-day war with Iran and how that shaped the entire Middle East and the proxy war that was happening for Iran, if it was for the Houthis or Hezbollah. How did impacted the Middle East in general from your point of view?
Thank you very much for the introduction, Abdelrahman. I appreciate it, and it's an honor to be here. I would like to thank the Council for the invitation, and especially Mr. Pratt and Mr. Mancino who convinced me to talk today. I would like to start by talking about the strategic shift that happened in the region for the last 2 years, because a seismic shift happened, the strategic shift happened in the region. So it's really, I don't want to repeat what other people are saying, but it's really a pivotal moment now in the region. The strategic map of the Middle East is being redrawn now. There are new facts on the ground, and regional powers have been humbled in the last 2 years. This all reveals a contour of a new era. And this era is laden with risk, but it has opportunities. The Middle East has entered a new strategic phase where old paradigms have collapsed and a new order is struggling to be reborn. Let's look at how the whole environment changed, and I will look at 7 pillars of that change. And we'll start with Iran.
Yeah, okay. Actually, thank you so much for doing this, because I got 1 coffee. I should get 2 coffees because I forgot that there's an opening statement. So thank you.
Thank you. And you told me that they told me I have 5 minutes.
Exactly.
Wish me luck, please. Okay. First, Iran, the collapse of a regional project. Iran's nuclear sites are in ruins. And what's left of them, of the program, the nuclear program, is under siege. Mm-hmm. So Iran now is in a very difficult and weakened position, not only because of the nuclear program bombing, but also because its strategic depth in the area has collapsed. We're talking here about Hezbollah in Lebanon, that was much, much weaker. We're talking about all the proxies that it's been supporting in the region. And especially the only place now that Iran still has in the region, that it still has power, is with the Houthis in Yemen. Mm-hmm. But the rest, Gaza and Hamas also is very weakened. So we have lots of losses for Iran in the region. And the major loss also for Iran is the loss of Syria. That's a very major strategic loss, because Syria was a very important base for Iran. also as a route for weapons to go to Lebanon and to Hezbollah, and all of this has been destroyed. So we are really facing a new weakened Iran, vulnerable Iran. It does not even have control over its airspace, and infiltrated intelligence-wise, it's infiltrated, so it's a weakened state. Does this mean that Iran is out? Iran is not out. Iran is down, but not out. It's trying to rebuild its deterrence in the region. It's trying to rebuild its proxies and help them. We have lots of reports about money keep coming to Hezbollah and lots of spoiler events happening in the region, and they all point to Iran trying to regain its deterrence and keeping its proxies alive in the region. But what does this mean? Does this mean that Iran is going to continue to be a spoiler in the region, or we're going to have an Iran that's going to be a force for peace one day? All of this is going to depend on how this new order is being reborn. Also, what will happen inside Iran. Iran now at a crossroad. Are we going to see, after all of these changes, any new Iran, more modern Iran, more liberal Iran, or something like that? Or we're going to have a more militant Iran. We'll have a more extremist regime after this. Right. After the death of Ayatollah Khamenei, what are we going to have? Are we going to have a more extremist leader, or we're going to have a more moderate leader? And all the answers to all these questions will tell what kind of environment we're going to have and what kind of role Iran is going to play, whether it's going to be a peace force or not. Right. The second pillar is Syria. Syria now, and I think Mona is going to talk more in detail about Syria, but the collapse of the Assad regime is one of the most important positive events that happened in the last century, in the last century, half century. Syria now is also at a crossroads because Syria is doing a lot of good work now. The new state in Syria is making progress. It's on the international stage. It's trying to unite the country and to reconstruct, but the volume of problems and challenges are huge. And Mona is going to talk more on detail, as I said. The basic four challenges that Syria is facing now are the Kurdish question in the north, the Druze tensions in the south, where Israel is interfering in the affairs of the Druze and Syria, and the Israeli occupation of the Golan Heights, which affects the legitimacy of the new state in Syria. And the fourth one is the Israeli-Turkish political rivalry over Syria. Syria today, then, is a symbol of possibilities and a warning. But the image of President Trump spraying perfume on the president of Syria at the White House gives you a very important signal where Syria is now, which camp Syria has chosen to be in, and what kind of force Syria is going to be in the region. Is it going to be a force of
And what kind of perfume? We would like to know.
We don't know. I think it seems the golden one, but we don't know what it is. We don't know what it is. The third one is the rise of Israel as a military power. Israel emerged after these 2 years of war as the most dominant military power in the region, what many call as Middle East's first hyperpower. But it's mainly a military power. Israel doesn't have a soft power in the region. Right. Israel doesn't have economic connections in the region. And 40 years of peace with the region and two important treaties in the region did not have integration. And this is what the Abraham Accords supposedly were supposed to change. So Israel now is a very powerful power. And how does the region seize this power? The region views Israel now as aggressive, unpredictable, and unrestrained. Its military success did not translate into a strategic victory. And on the contrary, Israel is suffering from international isolation. Its leaders are pursued by the ICC. So it has lots of problems. So this power did not bring it really the victory that it needs. Yeah. But the two events that really affected the region mostly in these last 2 years and will affect the prospects of peace with the whole region, especially with the Gulf, because this is what integration is. Israel is aiming to have integration with the Gulf because of economic possibilities. There are two events. The first one is the bombing of Qatar. It's a mediator, and that affected the Gulf psyche a lot because it was unprovoked. And the second one is the occupation of the Golan Heights, because also it was unprovoked. I mean, the Syrian regime has been, the Syrian new state has been saying that we don't want wars, we don't want to have any problems with Israel. And as the president of Syria says, we have not fired one bullet at Israel.
Correct.
When this happened, it really changed a lot of thinking in the region. And Israel's image changed overnight from a potential security partner to a destabilizing force. For the Gulf states, the attack on Doha was viewed as ghadr. Ghadr is a betrayal of trust, and it's at the deepest cultural level. It shook the very logic of Gulf-Israeli rapprochement. For Egypt, the Golan episode made Egypt very nervous about the future of the 1979 peace treaty. Right. Because if Israel can do that and erase the 1974 treaty with Syria, they can do it with Egypt too. The fourth one, the end of the militia era and the return of the state. Across the region, from Lebanon to Iraq to Gaza, the logic of the arms outside the state has collapsed. The lesson learned, no militia can survive as the guarantor of national security. Only the state can do that. But this remains a work in progress, because now Hezbollah is refusing to disarm, he's refusing to let the Lebanese state negotiate, to have a solution with Israel, and Hamas is refusing also to give up its one. So we don't know what's going to happen. The fifth one is the rise of regional powers. There is an emergence of a new middle powers in the region. They are advancing a new vision, one characterized by economic prosperity rather than ideology. Their priority is investment in human development, regional stability, order, and peace. These are the godfathers of the new order. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is transforming into a regional powerhouse and leading politically in the Arab world in support of a Palestinian state, supporting the transition in Syria, and working for stability in conflict areas. UAE is emerging as a regional economic power, working on connectivity and economic integration. Qatar is mastering mediation and negotiations in a fragmented world. Stability in the region is an imperative for these powers to anchor a peaceful order. Yeah. It's very important for them. Six, the rise of America, the peacemaker. The centrality of the United States' role in the Middle East is moving the region in the direction of Washington. America's most prominent role today is that of a peacemaker. Never before has an American president had so much influence and so much impact than President Trump has today on the Arab side, but also on the Israeli side. The Trump plan for Gaza, which was approved yesterday at the United Nations Security Council, will decide both the fate of Gaza and the future of Palestinian statehood if implemented right. The Arab relationship with Washington is growing stronger and closer. It's true that Arab countries are hedging and diversifying their relationships, but these relationships with China and Russia, for instance, they are not at the expense of the relationship with Washington. This doubling down is accompanied by a signal to Washington that you are our first choice, but we have other options. So we have the examples, the defense agreements. Seventh, a new race, technology and the future of warfare. The wars of the last 2 years introduced a new era of Middle Eastern warfare after Israel demonstrated its technological superiority. States across the Middle East now are rushing to buy new weapons, new AI capabilities, and technology transfers because they know the technology will decide the victor of the next war. But technology should be used, and I hope it can be used as a force for peace in the region, not only as for war. So how can we harness technology to build a new peaceful order? That's very important. In conclusion, with all these changes, is the region going to head for peace? I mean, it's going to depend on how everything is handled, whether in Syria, whether the United Nations peace plan now, if it's implemented right. All of these are going to be important for what kind of a region. But the most important thing is there's a lack of trust now in the region because of what happened. Right. This trust has been restored. And also we have to go back to the basics. We have to go back to international legality, the national law. We have to go to United Nations resolutions and look for political solutions because military solutions alone cannot solve the problem.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And definitely we will be... Definitely, we will focus on this about how we can gain the trust again between the U.S. and the entire region, especially after hitting Qatar, as you said, from Israel. Dr. April, could you please start with your opening statement for us? And we will make it maybe a little bit shorter because of the timing. I'm sorry.
Sure.
Okay.
So I'll take my 5 minutes,
Thank
and
you.
I'm going to focus first of all, thank you. Thank you to the council for allowing me to be on the panel. I'm happy to be here. So I'll focus my intervention, 5 minutes, on particularly the Arab Gulf states and on Yemen. So we've just heard this tour de force of the region from the ambassador, which is fantastic. And we heard so much about the change, right? The profound change that has happened in the wake of October 7th and the Gaza war and all the spillover effects, particularly in Syria. But I want to point out what I think is notable continuity in the strategic posture of Gulf states. And again, I'm going to generalize. So there are many differences between the Gulf states, but these states, and particularly I'm talking about Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Qatar, the largest economies of the GCC, and the ones I think have the most ambitious regional and global agendas, have for the most part really shifted from the inter-Gulf rivalries and the military interventions that really characterized the post-Arab Spring decade to a consensus around the need for de-escalation, bridge building, and diplomacy to stabilize this region. And this has really happened over the last 4 to 5 years. It was there before Gaza, and I think there's been remarkable continuity there. Some of this shift is a product of lessons learned from wars in Yemen and other places, but it's also directly connected to their very ambitious economic transformation agendas. We know that all of these states are moving from hydrocarbon-based economies to more diversified economies, and this is taking place in the context of a shifting global order and really eroded confidence in the U.S. security umbrella, which has also been a trend that we've seen unfold for about a decade. So as a result, they're really more actively shaping their near abroads through mediation, through investments, and through diplomacy. They're also trying, as you said, it's not a pivot away from the United States. The United States is the preferred security partner and probably economic partner. But I think that they're trying to reshape and redefine the relationship with the United States. They're seeking more predictability in the U.S. Security umbrella and redefining the relationship from oil for security or hydrocarbons for security, this kind of pact, to really a partnership on multiple fronts. But they're doing this also while balancing relationships with China, which will be a key economic actor, is now and will be in the future. So in many ways, I really see these states as a center of gravity for a certain type of change in the region, for an economic and even political transformation. In the Middle East, they're deeply ambitious. They're wanting to be hubs of new innovative technology, of AI, of logistics, new energy. And all of this requires at a very basic level regional stability, which they've chosen to pursue through bridge building at this point. So while I think they've benefited in some ways from Israeli and U.S. strikes on Iran and on the axis of resistance, and they certainly still see Iran as a national security threat, they've also been consistently worried that that military intervention will spill over into their areas, will be destabilizing, and throughout the last 2 years, they've sought diplomatic solutions and outreach. I think there's a growing concern, I agree with you, Ambassador, that the current Israeli government is a destabilizing force in the region. This is a product not only of Gaza and of what's happened in the West Bank and discussions of, wider Israel, but the attack on Qatar in particular. And I often hear from Gulf interlocutors that they neither want an Israeli or Iranian hegemon in the region. They want balance and predictability and guardrails. So I know I'm supposed to end soon, so just a few comments on Yemen very quickly. Usually Yemen is a side note in any regional conversation, and that's where we are now. But I think it's a really important side note at this point, Who would have thought? I mean, most of us would not have seen this meteoric rise of Ansar Allah or the Houthis onto the regional and global stage as they attack commercial shipping in the Red Sea corridor and Israel in defense of Hamas in Palestine. They are very much outliers in the axis of resistance right now. They're under tremendous economic pressure. They're now designated as a foreign terrorist organization. They're under strain. They have had military setbacks from both Israeli and U.S. airstrikes, but they're very much still standing. And I would say not only still standing, but they pose more, not less, of a threat to U.S. interests and allies in the region now than they did before the Gaza war. So there are no easy options on the table for addressing Ansar Allah. Certainly, if passed as prologue, any kind of heavy-handed military operation, particularly an external military intervention, has a tendency to make things worse and to strengthen the group. But there's also not a quick snapback to where we were before October 7th, before the Gaza war. We had on the table a UN-backed roadmap agreement that was backed by the P5, by the Saudis, by the Gulf, and it was really about bear-hugging the Houthis and bringing them into the international community, making them part of a Yemeni system. It had a ceasefire, it had a political process, it had economic benefits. But now many things have happened, and we have threats to maritime security, the Red Sea corridor, we have the FTO. So we really need to think very carefully about, how to reinvigorate a diplomatic process in that space. So there's much to discuss on Yemen. I think we'll come back to that in the Q&A.
Okay, thanks so much. Thanks, Dr. April. Yes, Dr. Fadi, if you could please give us your opening statement, please.
Okay. First of all, thank you very much for this wonderful introduction. It's a great privilege and honor to be with this esteemed, of course, panel. And I would like to try to be as brief as possible. I know we are running behind time, and I will try not also to overlap with what other speakers have already mentioned about like Syria. But I would like to say a few points about the Levant in general. One thing I would like to stress, and my points will be more like discussion points, hoping to dig deeper into the questions and the answers in the Q&A. So one thing we need to understand is that the end of the 2024, the early 2025 is a very historic moment for the Levant. And I'm particularly here looking at Syria and Lebanon, and I will speak about Jordan very quickly in a minute. In the end of 2024, early 2025 was a historical moment for both countries. In Syria, we had the collapse of the Assad regime and the emergence, of course, of a new government, a Syrian government led by Ahmed al-Shara. In Lebanon, in 2025, early 2025, we have a new president elected following the significantly reduced influence of Hezbollah in the Lebanese government. Joseph Aoun also was, of course, a president who was coming to power with the promise to curb Iranian influence in Lebanon. The Prime Minister, Nawaf Salam, who was, of course, elected later on, came to power with the same promise that he is going to focus on the monopoly of power in the state. That means there will be no role for non-state militia, and to talk here about Hezbollah in the political scenery of the country. And that was, of course, followed by re-engagement with the United States to fulfill that promise, as we see. And these were talks, of course, which Ambassador Tom Barak tried to focus on later. In both countries, Syria and Lebanon, we have an opportunity with those two new emerging governments. With this opportunity, of course, comes three very important risks. Also, of course, there are many risks, but I will try to focus on three very important ones. The first one, in my opinion, is the fragile state institutions in both countries. The government of Ahmed al-Shara, as we know, comes after the collapse of the Assad regime. Over the last decade, at least, the Assad regime destroyed the infrastructure of Syria, and we are not talking about buildings and, of course, enforcing citizens to leave their towns and their cities, but also we are talking about the administrative infrastructure of the country, including the army, the police, institutions, so on and so forth. In Lebanon, we are talking about a different conversation, of course, but we are still talking about a fragile institution. We are talking about corruption, the need to restructure the bank sector, sector, fiscal reform, much need for fiscal reform in the country, and of course, combating corruption in the country. Both governments need to address this very important question about the fragile state institutions. The other challenge with both countries and the two new governments face also is remilitarization. In Syria, there is, of course, the risk and the challenge of looking at the remnants of the Assad regime, not to mention, of course, the regrouping of ISIS in parts of the country. ISIS, as we know, tried to take the opportunity of the vacuum of power in Syria and to regroup. And we know that this is one of the very important topics which President Trump discussed with President Ahmed al-Shara in the White House on November 10. In Lebanon, we are thinking, of course, and looking at the restructuring and the reconstructing the institutions, the power institutions of Hezbollah. Hezbollah, as we know, is refusing to disarm. And after the significant military loss by, of course, the Israeli attacks following Hezbollah's involvement with the war in Gaza. We know in October 8, Hezbollah initiated what is called in Arabic Jabhat Isnad, a support line for Gaza. And that was followed by attacks by Israel. The Israeli government promised that it will take down Hezbollah and all the Iranian proxies in the region, and that is what eventually led to the collapse of the Assad regime in Syria in late 2024. Hezbollah obviously still exists, but very much and significantly weakened, now trying to reconstitute and rebuild its military infrastructure, and that is another important challenge which the new government, Prime Minister Nawaf Salam, is willing in a way to address. The third important point about Syria and Lebanon has to do also with the geopolitical competition in these two countries. And that is the third challenge which both governments obviously have to deal with. In the case of Lebanon, for example, we are thinking about Israel, very much powerful in the south, trying to take down what remains of the institutions of Hezbollah and the power of Hezbollah. We know that the ceasefire in November 2024 last year forced Hezbollah to go to the north of the Litani River. In Syria, we are talking about not only Israel and Iran, actually. We are talking about a third regional power, which is Turkey, which is adding a complication to the political scene in Syria. Yeah. Both Turkey and Israel seem to have kind of power competition in Syria. And one of the reasons why many critics think that Syria has so far not signed a security pact with Israel is because the Turkish government doesn't want to see an increasing influence of the Israeli government in the south of Syria. With all these challenges, I will try to end here. With all these challenges, there rises the opportunity of a new recalibration of Arab states in both Lebanon and Syria. Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the UAE, as we know, promised to help the Syrian government with investments in the country, but that is all conditioned on the reforms that these countries will be doing. The United States is also shifted, as we know, following the Assad collapse, the collapse of the Assad regime, from practicing maximum pressure on the Assad government to what is called like managed stabilization of the country by lifting sanctions. And obviously open relationship with the Syrian government is heading towards that end. So we are talking about a moment for the Levant where both Syria and Lebanon both countries have a lot of opportunities, but also they have to address those many risks on the table.
Yeah, thanks so much, Dr. Fadi. And Dr. Mona Al-Yacoubi, could you please give us your opening statement?
Yes, thank you, and thanks to the National Council for inviting me. Let me, Mr. Moderator, let you know that I am no longer restrained or constricted in my time here. So,
okay.
You don't
so
have
we're
to,
good.
You can take a deep breath.
Okay, thanks for letting me know. Yeah.
So let me just maybe jump in and I think actually emphasize a couple of points that have already been made and then perhaps offer a few observations specifically on Syria, having just returned from a brief visit to Damascus last week. first, I would like to kind of double down on Amal's opening point about, she called it a strategic shift in the region. I call it a hinge moment. Essentially, we are seeing the collapse or the vanishing of the order that had pertained, I would say, for the last 7 decades. And we are witnessing the emergence of a new order. And I think part of what we are seeing is indeed these significant transformations that are happening in the Levant, as Fadi had noted. The collapse of the Assad regime, I think, is perhaps the most consequential reverberation. I would argue that it came out of the crucible of the conflict in Gaza. And of course, similarly, the decimation of Hezbollah in Lebanon, both of which put those 2 Levantine countries at what I would call a pivotal moment, a moment in which they both have the opportunity to embark on a trajectory toward stronger state institutions, transparent governance, reforms. In the case of Lebanon, a reassertion of state sovereignty. In the case of Syria, really the transition to what many are calling a new Syria. But I would also argue that in both cases, the window of opportunity is not limitless. That there really is, I think, a challenge against time and all of the various countervailing forces, Fadi, I think that you laid out very, very well. And so I think that's why it's essential to, number one, delineate well what the challenges are, and then number two, especially given that this is an audience of policymakers, both U.S. and Arab, to think creatively about how to exploit this incredibly important moment of opportunity and ensure that the region really does continue to move on to a more stable and ideally prosperous trajectory. Let me double down or really emphasize some points on Syria, not only because I just came back from Syria, but also because I think in many ways Syria is the linchpin for the region. Its geostrategic location at the heart of the Middle East really underscores, in many ways, how Syria goes, so goes the region. If this transition that Syria is in the midst of goes well, the benefits will reach far beyond Syria to the region, and frankly, I would argue even globally. If, on the other hand, the transition in Syria falters, and there are many, many points of weakness, unfortunately, that will also have negative spillover impacts that go well beyond Syria. So I think it's really important to think about Syria. Let me just very quickly offer just a few quick points of observation on the transition in Syria. Really, essentially, what I would argue is that the transition in Syria will really turn on 2 key questions. And they are, can Ahmed al-Shara consolidate power? And if so, how does the Syrian transition government govern? It is those 2 key questions that really will, in my view, determine the path of Syria. And we're seeing, some slight encouraging signs, but also some worrying signs. And here, let me just reflect very briefly on the observations that I'm still processing and thinking through from my recent trip. One is what I found fascinating, and it happened that I was in Damascus on the same day that Ahmed al-Shara was here in Washington with the unprecedented White House Oval Office visit, first of a Syrian president. And what was notable, and I sort of had my ears to the ground as to how were everyday Syrians reacting to this historic visit. And more what was told is, yes, the new government has done an excellent job of building international credibility, but it is not doing enough to garner domestic credibility and legitimacy. And so that is the first key point, that more needs to be done to reach the Syrian people directly and to address their concerns and help fulfill their aspirations. The second key point, and it goes without saying, but having had eyes on, is just the level of devastation, which is really mind-boggling, very, very significant, just really minutes from the center of the capital. And what I saw was just a very fraction of the devastation that is really very much the case across much of the western part of the country. So the rebuilding and the reconstruction are going to be enormous tasks. In order to garner the kinds of funding and resources necessary, and here again I would point to Fadi, your, I think, excellent point, the Gulf is going to play a key role here. It's going to be less the United States and more the Gulf. But no one is going to put money in Syria if they don't have confidence that their money will be well spent. If there is a concern about continuing risk, that is going to inhibit funding for reconstruction. That then leads to just, I guess, one more really, I think, very important point, and that is a concern about the willingness of the Shara government to share power. And what was really striking and interesting is this kind of this interesting divide between the Idlibis, those who come from Idlib, those who were key to fighting the revolution, to bringing down the Assad regime, and the rest, and those in Damascus in particular, which is, of course, the center of power. This tension between those from Idlib and those from Damascus, I think, is significant, and more needs to be done by the transition government to build out ties of trust across the population so that everyone feels vested in Syria's future. And of course, to the points that Amal rightly raised in the beginning, we all know Syria is a mosaic. It is a country of very distinct minorities who have very distinct views, and in some cases who are armed. So the Kurds in the northeast, certainly also concerns with the Druze community in the south. And lastly, we cannot forget the pretty significant violence that occurred in the spring on the coast against the Alawite community. It is going to be essential that more be done to build out bridges, to reknit Syria's social fabric, and to ensure that all of these very critical parts of Syria's population feel that the new Syria is a Syria for them. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Dr. Mona. And we would like to start the questions with Ambassador Amal about if we have new Syria, do you think we might have new Iran? In other words, can Iran accept a regional order not shaped by its own ideology?
Thank you for the question. Look, Iran now, as I said before, Iran is down now, but Iran is not out. So Iran is still trying to restore that power and that influence that it has in the region. Whether they're going to succeed or not, it's going to depend how much Syria is going to succeed in rebuilding, in uniting, in becoming a strong state. And to become a strong state, as Mona was saying, it's going to depend on a couple of factors. One of them, which is a very important one, and it has something to do with this capital here, is that Syria has to be freed from all these sanctions and the restraints that are put.
And that will take time, of course.
Because Syria has, its enemies are so many and determined, but its friends are reluctant. I mean, we still have the Congress refusing to lift the Caesar Acts. Sure. And that's very, very important to strengthen Syria by opening Syria and giving the tools to be able to become
but don't you think President Trump gave them a time, 6 months, to just giving Congress time, because the Congress agenda always packed with so many bills. So basically, he's giving Congress time and also giving, on the other hand, the Syrian regime.
But if you're an investor, as Mona was saying, if you're an investor, and you look at things are in incremental steps and not happening, you're going to say, what will happen? I cannot put my money and 6 months take them out. Sure. So for investments and for the international community to come in and help Syria, whether
must be removed.
You have to see that Syria is free, and Syria is not free now.
Right.
So this is a very important factor. The other factors that are going to affect whether Iran is going to have more to come back, is that also if Lebanon can succeed in wresting the power from the militias and becoming a more, independent, politically independent country that can take its decisions. Also, it's going to depend on internal Iran. Would Iran will continue this route? They want to go back to having these proxies and playing a spoiler in the region, or they want to play a more constructive role and focus on their internal situation. My reading of the situation in Iran now, of course, they're trying to restore their deterrence, but I think they are very preoccupied with their internal situation and shoring up their deterrence internally. But after they do that, I'll be worried that Iran will go back to play that role. But if you are short, if you are strong internally, Iran cannot get in. Iran now is out from the almost 3 of the 4 capitals, Arab capitals, that they were bragging that they control.
Yeah,
thank you.
You're welcome. Dr. April, I would like here to ask about the balance for the Gulf countries. How could they keep their strong relationship with the U.S. and at the same time keep Iran quiet, especially they are neighbors, and Iran right now is different than Iran before October 7. To what extent do you think the Gulf countries will be able to deal with the new Iran if President Trump, as he said many times, that they would like to talk, they would like to have negotiations with the U.S. Do you think Gulf countries can play an important role in these negotiations?
Yes, I think they can, and they have, right? So Oman had very much stepped up to facilitate that discussion, before we saw the 12-day war. So, Oman, I think, continues to work behind the scenes as a bridge builder on that front. Maybe you also have, just kind of, again, I think the Gulf states, it's not that they don't, still have enduring national security threats from Iran, even if they have been depleted somewhat militarily, but they just have a different strategy for managing the threat. Right, which is to talk to your enemies. And Saudi Arabia, right, in 2023 had a rapprochement facilitating by the Chinese, and that still endures. So there are multiple contacts on multiple levels. It'll be interesting to see what comes out of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's visit today, to see what kind of aspects of the regional politics come up, not just the bilateral, commercial deals and defense pacts, but, what areas will they discuss, Iran? Because I think, again, there does seem to be a posture in the Gulf that, Iran's not going anywhere, right? It's going to be there. So we're going to deal with them, reach out to them. They would prefer, I think, a diplomatic solution to what is indeed a thorny problem and continues to be.
Yes. Okay, Dr. Fadi, speaking about Syria, after what happened and the extensive diplomatic traveling for President al-Shara, his last visit to the U.S. was number 20 since January. Do you think right now we can say that Syria returned back to the Arab League and the relationship between Syria currently is improving and it will even be more improved after the sanctions will be removed from Congress? And what is the relationship between the Syrian regime right now and also Iran?
So, to start with the last part, the relationship between Syria and Iran obviously is very much different from before the collapse of the Assad regime. President Ahmed al-Shara mentioned that, of course, there is a lot of complications between rebuilding a relationship between Syria and Iran. Iran was sponsoring, actually, the Assad regime for the last at least decade, and it's the reason and the source of the horrifics which happened in Syria. So there was a path for Syria to reestablish relationship with Russia, but at this time it's very complicated to reestablish relations with Iran, and I don't think this will be happening any soon. As far as the Arab countries are concerned, the Arab countries, they do have a lot of credit now in Syria, actually. Saudi Arabia and of course other Arab countries were the reason why, plus Turkey, of course, the reason why President Trump was convinced by the argument made by the Crown Prince on May 14 to lift the sanctions on Syria. There is much opportunities, of course, for the Syrian government to reintegrate that back to the Arab states, and I think this is very much one of the top priorities. And you mentioned that President Ahmed al-Shara made many international visits. Some people say, like, by the end of 2026, he would have visited all the countries which are like permanent members in the Security Council. So obviously there is much activity here, but there is, and I will relate to what Muna said about the inside credibility for the Syrian government. There is much doubt about how far the government of Ahmed al-Shara is willing to share power with other factions in the Syrian society. And we are not talking here about the Alawites, the Kurds, but even also the Sunnis who are not the who are not the Idlibis, if you will. So there is much concern about how far the Syrian government is willing to share power with factions, including the Sunnis, the Alawites, the Druze, and also as far as the military is concerned, how far President Ahmed al-Shara is able to control other factions in the Syrian military. We know that, for example, I think Abu Amsha, who is the leader of the Southern Brigade in the newly formed Syrian army, has a very terrible past, actually, in Afrin when it comes to human rights. So those people having high rank positions in the Syrian army is a very huge, big question mark on the structure of the newly formed Syrian army. So these are things the Syrian government will have to address.
And that leads us actually to a very important point here. I want to discuss it with Dr. Muna. What exactly remains to Syria? What is the most obstacle situation that might solve the problem right now in front of Syria?
Well, I don't think there's a silver bullet for Syria. There's no one solution. But I think what's critical is going to be, as we've been saying, the need to establish a form of governance that is inclusive and that allows and indeed encourages all of the very diverse elements of Syria's society to contribute. Because if not, we've already seen what kinds of violent reactions there will be, whether it's, again, this idea of those in the south who feel excluded, the Druze, where some are actually seeking to create or sort of almost secede. I also think what's going to be essential, let's not forget, Syria is probably one of the most complex post-conflict environments we can think of. And the country has gone through an enormous amount of trauma. And so figuring out and developing transitional justice mechanisms that ensure accountability but also pave the way for reconciliation will also be critical. If these sort of key questions around governance and transitional justice can be addressed sufficiently, that, I think, is going to open the way for the kinds of investment in Syria that will be critical for the country to rebuild. The estimates for rebuilding Syria are in the tens of billions, if not hundreds of billions, depending on whose estimates you look at. This is not going to come from UN budgets or others. It's really going to be essential not only that Gulf actors play a role, but also that ultimately there's private sector investment in the country, and that is indeed the model that the current government is putting forth, that it is a reconstruction by investment.
We're running out of time. Just one last question to Ambassador Amal about Lebanon. As I talked before to the U.S. envoy to Syria, Tom Barak, and he told me a very important point, that the U.S. are concerned that we don't want to see a civil war in Lebanon when disarming Hezbollah. To what extent do you think that will take time, and how could the U.S. play an important role in this, especially that they are concerned about not having any escalation or a civil war? And we want to make it quick.
Quickly, also, I would like to add one thing about Iran. Because yesterday there was a report that the president of Iran sent a letter to the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia before he left to Washington. So we assume that maybe they're sending a message to Washington. Maybe Saudi Arabia is playing a role also to try to bring them together and try to find a solution. And the solution solution for the relationship between Iran and the West will help a lot the problem with proxies.
Absolutely.
And having, stopping the support for these proxies will be part of the deal.
Sure.
As for Lebanon, yes, the problem in Lebanon is that the Lebanese state and the officials are telling everybody that we want to disarm Hezbollah. We would like to have the state have the power, the sole authority in the country, but we are afraid that this could lead to a civil war. And, people give you examples of during the civil war, how the Lebanese army split politically on political lines and stuff like that. So they have an argument to do that. The problem now is that the Washington is insistent that it has to happen quickly.
Yeah.
And yesterday there was a cancellation of the visit of the Lebanese head of the army here because they're not happy with the pace of the disarmament and what's happening in the country. So there's a pressure on the Lebanon from both sides, from here and from the internally. The thing that could help things and break the logjam about this is that if you really want to have Hezbollah disarm and Hezbollah lose its credibility with the population, what's the point of Israel occupying these 5 points? Strategically, they really do not make sense.
Right.
But by keeping the occupation even on that small part of the south, you're giving the Hezbollah the argument like, the land is still occupied. We cannot disarm. So each side has to do something. It's not going to be one-dimensional.
Ambassador Amal, Dr. April, Dr. Fadi, and Dr. Maya Yacoubi, thank you so much. And it's a great discussion. And thank you so much for our audience. Appreciate it. Thank you.